The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely.
There is a version of you that never quite got to exist. Not because you lacked what it takes, not because life didn't give you chances, but because very early, before you even had words for what was happening, you learned a lesson nobody taught you out loud. You learned that certain parts of you were dangerous to show, that your anger pushed people away, that your sadness made others uncomfortable, that your ambition sounded like arrogance, that your fear was weakness. And then, with the quiet efficiency of a mind that only wants to survive, you did what any human being would do. You hid them. You buried them so deep that after a while, you couldn't even remember they were there. And on top of that burial, you built a version of yourself that worked, that was accepted, that knew how to behave. The problem is, that version was never really you. Carl Jung spent his entire life trying to explain what happens to a human being who lives disconnected from themselves. What happens to their relationships, their decisions, their persistent feeling that something is wrong even when everything is technically fine. And what he found is disturbing, not because it's complicated, but because it's simple. Simple and inescapable. Everything you bury stays alive. Everything you hide keeps operating. Just no longer under your control, under the control of the unconscious, and the unconscious does not have infinite patience. There is something people who genuinely know themselves have in common. It's not that they're smarter or suffered less. It's that at some point, they made a decision most people postpone forever. They decided to stop running from themselves, to look at what was buried, what was hidden, what was real beneath everything the world had asked them to be. And what they found on the other side of that encounter was not destruction. It was freedom. What you're about to understand is not abstract theory. It is the map of something already happening inside you right now. It is the difference between living your life and simply performing it. Jung called this process individuation, and it begins with a question most people never dare to ask honestly. Who are you? When nobody is watching? When you were a child? Before you knew the names of things? You already knew something far more fundamental. You knew how to survive socially. You knew, with a precision no child can articulate but every child can feel, which parts of you were welcome and which generated distance. And with that raw survival instinct, you separated. You kept what worked in front, and what didn't work, you kept far behind, in a place that with time grew so dark, you forgot it existed. Jung called that place the shadow, and here it's important to understand what the shadow is not. The shadow is not the evil in you. The shadow is not the worst of you. The shadow is simply what was banned. Your anger, which was called rudeness. Your ambition, which was called arrogance. Your need to be seen, which was called showing off. Your fear of abandonment, which was called weakness. Every time a part of you received a name that sounded like an accusation, you pushed it a little further into the dark, and there it stayed, waiting. Because what Jung understood is that what you bury does not die. It does not disappear. It simply waits for the least convenient moment to appear. And it appears in the disproportionate irritation you feel when someone around you is very successful, in the discomfort you feel around people who freely express what they feel, in the relationship patterns you repeat without being able to explain why. The shadow does not need your permission to act. It acts regardless. The only difference is whether you are conscious of it or not. But the shadow is only half the story. Because while you were hiding what you couldn't show, you were also building what you would show in its place. Jung called this the persona. The word was chosen with surgical precision. Persona, in Latin, was the mask that actors in Greco-Roman theater wore to indicate which character they were playing. Not the actor's face, the role. And Jung said we all develop personas with the same function: the professional self, the family self, the self in front of friends. Each context with its own version of you, carefully calibrated to generate minimum friction and maximum approval. None of this is necessarily bad. The problem is one, but it is devastating. When you spend enough time wearing the mask, you forget the mask is a mask. When you play a role for decades, you begin to believe you are the character. And then, one day, someone asks who you really are, and you hesitate. Not because you're shy, but because the most honest answer you could give would be a list of roles you learned to play, not a description of who exists beneath them. How many decisions in your life were truly yours? How many careers chosen because it was expected? How many dreams filed away not because they were impractical, but because they weren't socially accepted in your environment? Jung asked a simple and relentless question. Who are you when nobody is watching? When there is nobody to applaud or disappoint? If that question produces a pause that lasts too long, then you haven't yet started the most important work of your life. There is an experience almost every human being has had, but very few can interpret correctly. The experience of being disproportionately irritated by someone. Not a reasonable irritation, an irritation that seems too large for what provoked it, a near visceral discomfort around someone you barely know. Jung would say the justification is the least important part. What matters is what that discomfort reveals. He called it projection, the mechanism by which what we cannot see in ourselves appears amplified in others. The man who buried his ambition because he was taught that wanting too much was ugly will feel instinctive discomfort around people who pursue their goals openly. Not because their ambition is wrong, but because it activates something he pushed into the dark and does not want to see. The woman who learned that showing vulnerability was shameful will despise those who are openly vulnerable, not because their vulnerability is a problem, but because it mirrors something she has forbidden in herself. We do not see the world as it is. We see the world as we are. Or more precisely, as we do not dare to be. This is perhaps the most disturbing idea in all of Jungian psychology, and also the most useful. Once you understand it, every intense reaction you have toward another person becomes information, becomes a mirror, an opportunity to ask not why that person is like that, but what in me is being activated by this. Jung also observed that compulsive comparison is one of the most effective forms of self-destruction. Not the natural comparison we all make, but the comparison that becomes a habit. When someone's success automatically makes you feel like you have failed. When you measure your progress not by what matters to you, but by the ruler others use to measure theirs. What exists? The only thing that truly exists is your path, unique and unrepeatable. And when you spend your time looking at other people's paths instead of yours, you accumulate resentment from trying to live a life that was never yours to begin with. When your sense of value lives outside of you, in other people's hands, in the number of likes, in what your parents think, then every time the world doesn't validate what you need it to validate, your entire world trembles. Every time life doesn't follow the script you believed you had, you enter crisis. Not because life is unfair, but because you outsourced your center. And outsourcing your center is the most effective way to guarantee you will never feel whole. Jung had a name for the process by which a human being stops living outward and begins living inward. He called it individuation, and it is important to understand what it really means. Individuation is not optimization. It's not becoming an improved version of the character you are already performing. It's the process of becoming who you already are. Beneath everything the world placed on top of you throughout your entire life, it begins with something our culture does everything to avoid. Learning to tolerate internal discomfort without running from it. Feel anxiety. Eliminate it. Feel boredom. Open the phone. Feel loneliness. Fill the calendar. Jung would say that every time you flee the discomfort instead of asking what it has to tell you, you lose information about yourself. Ordinary discomfort is often a signal that something in your life is not aligned with who you really are, a signal that something in the shadow wants to be seen. The goal is not to eliminate the dark parts of yourself. It is not to reach unshakable serenity where everything is light. That state doesn't exist. And anyone who says they've arrived there is wearing a particularly sophisticated mask. The goal is to contain the full complexity of what you are without that complexity destroying you. To feel anger without anger taking control. To feel fear without fear dictating your choices. To recognize your own contradictions without falling into self-contempt. That is real psychological maturity. Not perfect control, complete presence. Jung made a distinction that changes everything between the ego and the self. The ego is the center of consciousness, the part of you that has a name, a story, that says, I am like this, necessary. But it has a dangerous tendency. It believes it is everything there is. The self, as Jung understood it, is something far larger. The totality of the psyche, conscious and unconscious together. Older than the ego, wiser than the ego, deeper than any story you have ever told about yourself. Individuation is the process by which the ego learns to relate to the self instead of confusing itself with it. The process by which you stop believing that what you know about yourself is all there is. That opening changes everything. How you relate to others, because you stop needing them to define you. How you make decisions, because you begin deciding from inside instead of outside. How you face suffering, because you begin to see in it a possibility of transformation. Jung was brutally honest. You will find things in yourself you won't like, moments where honesty with yourself will hurt, but he promised something more valuable than any comfort that running can offer. Freedom. The freedom to be who you really are. The freedom to choose from a genuine place instead of reacting from fear. The freedom to, when your life reaches its end, recognize it as yours. There is a paradox worth naming. When a person genuinely dedicates themselves to self-knowledge, they do not become more selfish. Exactly the opposite. They become more capable of loving, because they love from fullness and not from lack. More honest in their relationships, because they no longer need a mask to be loved. More compassionate, because by confronting their own shadows, they learned that we all carry ours. The greatest gift you can offer the world is not to sacrifice yourself for it. It is to show up in it as what you really are. Complete, imperfect, genuine, and alive. Jung once wrote that the life that is not examined from within expresses itself as fate from without. Everything you don't dare to look at in yourself, life will place in front of you anyway. just no longer as a choice, as a circumstance. The relationship that repeats with different faces, the conflict that reappears in different contexts, the feeling of being stuck that doesn't go away no matter how many external things you change. That's the shadow asking to be seen, the only way it knows how, when nobody listens voluntarily. The question is not whether this encounter will happen. It will. The question is which side of it you'll be on. Will you arrive at it with awareness, with courage, with the willingness to be transformed? Or will you wait for life to force your hand? That option does not stay open forever. The cost of not doing this work is paid in the most expensive currency you have, your own life. The years lived in a role that was never yours. The relationships built on top of a mask. The quiet growing feeling that something is wrong, even when everything is technically fine. You made it here. There is something in you that recognizes what was said here, not as new information, but as something you already knew and hadn't yet allowed yourself to articulate. That recognition is the beginning, not of the answer, of the path. Who am I when nobody is watching? What would I choose if I weren't afraid? What parts of me are waiting, in the dark, to finally be seen? If something here touched you, subscribe to the channel. Because what was opened here continues, and every video is one more layer of what you already are, being remembered.